Basically what we do is we bring in the raw material, which is the raw grain, which is a corn, and we do a 30% milo inclusion here in Hereford. Some plants are known to do 100% milo. And basically the grain grinds the same, and it's got typically the same starch content, so you get about the same results. The difference is going to be in the nutritional value of the byproduct or the co-product, which is the cattle feed that we produce on the back end. It's typically the only difference between the grains. Around here, the feedlots like corn better than they do the milo, so we try to keep the majority of our source corn, and we include milo just for price differences. Basically what we do is at Hereford facility, ADM is kind of involved directly with us, where they'll bring in unit trains of corn from the Midwest, and they'll handle all the grain. They'll offload it, they'll store it, and they'll transfer it to us on a daily basis or as needed. Typically, we will transfer about 100 to 110,000 bushel a day. Like I said, 30% of that's going to be milo, the rest is going to be corn. We produce about 285,000 gallons per day of ethanol. And what we do is we basically bring in the corn, we put it through a cleaning system where we take off a lot of the chaff and everything else that comes along with the grain, and then we put it through a mill. Basically, the object of the milling is just to shatter the kernel, extract the starch that's inside the grain there, and then what we do is put it through what we call a cook system. All we're doing is preparing that starch that's available from the grind. We're preparing that for conversion, and basically what we're going to do is convert it from starch to a complex sugar. Complex sugar being 4 strands or higher, and that'll be the cook process where we've converted the starch to sugar. Once we get to the fermentation phase, which is kind of the second phase in line of the process, we take the already converted sugar, the complex sugar, and we break that down. We simplify it. We simplify it down to what we call a fermentable sugar. Fermentable sugar being 2 strands or less. Basically, the yeast that we introduce to the fermenters can only consume a certain size of sugar molecule. So we break that down via enzymes. We use enzymes. It breaks it down to a fermentable sugar. We introduce the yeast to the fermenter. The yeast consume or basically attach themselves to the sugar, and as a byproduct, the yeast will produce ethanol, and along with several other byproducts that they produce, CO2 being one of them, and then a lot of heat. They generate a lot of heat when they're real active in producing the ethanol. So those are 2 of the or 3 of the byproducts that come out of fermentation. Once we get through the fermentation phase, we go through a distillation phase. The distillation phase is basically where you're separating everything that's not alcohol away from what has been produced in fermentation. And basically that's done via distillation columns under vacuum and temperature difference. Basically what we're doing is separating, we're vaporizing the alcohol away from the water and the mash at cooler temperatures, and then what remains is the water and the mash that we used in the fermenter to get to this phase in the process. And the mash and the water that's left over goes through a centrifuge phase where it's centrifuged away from each other. The water is reintroduced to the process, reused as a product that we call backset, and the solids or the mash that's left over, everything that wasn't converted to sugar, gets discharged out to a big concrete area. It's a holding area where we will convey that out into trucks and ship it out for around the local area for the feedlots. The product is high in fat. It's a good nutritional feed for the local feed yards, and given the amount of feedlots that we have in this area, we don't have to dry our product down, whereas plants out in the Midwest and what have you, where there's abundance of product, they'll dry it, they'll rail it, barge it, whatever they do to get rid of it. We've actually got the luxury of keeping everything local. So we ship out about 85 loads of wet cake, which is the feed, per day to the local feed yards. And we'll show you that once we get out there. The final phase in the production side of it is where we dehydrate the alcohol that we've produced in distillation. What we do is we take the alcohol that we've produced, and we take out the remainder of the water to bring it up to standards where we can ship it out and meet the required limits for blending. Once that's done, we transfer it. We blend it with the low grade gasoline, denaturant, what we call it. And that's basically for shipping purposes. So we blend about 2.2% of the denaturant and blend it into a tank, and then from there we'll load rail cars and tanker trucks for distribution to blending stations. We ship out on a schedule about a unit train every 10 days. So that's about 96 cars every 10 days, and each car holds about 29,000 gallons. So we ship out a pretty good amount of gallons. We ship out. Right now we're shipping out 2 unit trains to California and 1 to South Texas, is where the destination for our product goes.
How much is used locally?
In comparison to what we produce, very little. We ship out about 3 truckloads a week to New Mexico when the market's right, and when we ship out maybe 30-40 trucks a month to Amarillo, the local area. So in comparison to what we produce, very minimal is used in the local area.
So the unit trains that you ship out to South Texas and such, those are going to gasoline refineries?
I believe they go to refineries or blending stations where they'll blend the product with the gasoline and then ship it to the convenience stores where it's sold.
Okay.
As a gasoline already pre-blended. And that's kind of the gist of the way we operate here. What we'll do now is just go back and we'll do a walkthrough of the plant. I'll show you the control room, the lab where we make sure everything's in accordance to where we need to be, and then kind of show you how we load trucks out.